Jan,
What's up, man?
what's going on? It's a beautiful day outside today, so great day to film a video.
Yeah, and we've been talking about this kind of concept for a while, on and off. A way that we can kind of engage and communicate and really like grow our community from an online aspect, especially, and also provide some of that inside perspective from a local gaming store level, right? So, why don't you kind of put that all together and talk about what the top shelf experience is from a broad level and kind of our vision with that?
Yeah, so this is something that has been in the stew for some time. The idea of a podcast, many of us here at the shop, we either listen to podcasts or audiobooks. It's obviously a very popular format. And part of the reason why we wanted to do one, there's a few reasons actually. Here at Top Shelf, we really pride ourselves on the customer experience to the point where actually, when you step in the store, you'll notice actually there's just a lot more space and a lot less product. And the reason why we do that is because we want to focus on engaging our clients and customers in conversations, getting to know them, talk with them, chat with them. What deck are you building? What are you collecting? What brings you back to the hobby, right? Or what brings you to the hobby if it's something that's new to you. And so when Mo and Mo's our other partner, were discussing, we're like, well, what's the best way for us to connect with our broader community? For the community that can't come into the store, but we love you just as much. You can join us on our Discord, follow us on our Instagram, and now what we're hoping is through the podcast series Top Shelf Experience, we're able to deliver a message to you and our thoughts, just almost as if you were here at the shop listening to a conversation. And of course, you can partake in that conversation multiple ways, right? Online or in person.
Yeah, like we're in the middle of our store right now. This is how the store looks on a day-to-day basis, although it's always evolving, so it might be changing sometime soon. But yeah, we're just in the middle of the store, and this is, what you'd experience if you were in store as well, right? So, in a sense, trying to like parallel that to be very close to kind of, our in-store customers, right?
Exactly. So super excited about Top Shelf Experience, and I think what we're going to be kicking it off with is our Altered series, which I know something that you're personally very interested about.
Yes, I think we kind of finally have a roadmap to get that off the ground and build that out, and we're doing that through Altered, which is a new trading card game that we're all very excited for at the store, right? Like, we all tried it and we're literally all playing, and that just gives us kind of a good base to start off and connect with not just our community, but a new community that's emerging in the TCG space, one that we think is pretty unique, and yeah, we're excited for that.
Yeah, so it's going to be a multi-part series. There's not like a fixed amount of videos we plan to shoot because, as you mentioned, Altered is a brand new TCG to the space. But we do plan on covering a bunch of kind of initial videos, exploring what Altered is, how to play competitively, kind of breaking down each of the factions. There's 6 factions, and the videos after that, a lot of that will be dictated by the community as well, right? Like, what
Yeah.
are you seeing? What are you hearing? What's interesting? What do we want to discuss? It's not only going to be Altered. Altered is kind of going to kick it off, but we definitely want to have this series extend to our other brands, our other TCGs, Pokemon, Magic, Warhammer, Gundam, for
Yep.
example, or new. If you've watched our Evo Retro series, right, covering new products, I think these are all things that you would almost talk to us if you were here in person. But again, like, the podcast is just a way for us to share our thoughts with the community and hear what you guys have to say, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. So for now, though, we're diving right into Altered, and we'll be kind of starting at a base level and more of a beginner kind of style, and then as we go on, we'll get into more advanced concepts, I guess you could say, and really kind of digging deeper into the TCG and what it's all about. So
Yep.
yeah, yeah.
All right, man. Well, what's Altered?
I mean, it's a TCG for one, but it kind of crosses over into a board game,
Yep.
right? I don't know if I would say it's half and half, but it's definitely a mix of both. The way you set up the game, if you were to look at it, you'd think it's a board game because it has, that middle part of the board. But the way you play the game is very much kind of like your traditional TCG. It just has those board game elements, right? And it comes from a company, Equinox, that's where they come from, board games. They don't necessarily come from the TCG space, but there's a lot of infrastructure that they're kind of leveraging to be able to launch a TCG and hopefully find a lot of success.
Yeah, honestly, like that's the one thing that really fascinates this new TCG Altered on the space compared to some other TCGs, right? The fact that, as you mentioned, they're a board game company entering the TCG space and approaching it in a new way, and we'll kind of explore that. Like that to me is exciting, man, because I think like the TCG space is not by any means a young and fresh industry now.
Oh yeah.
Right? We're talking multi-decades. You've got the titans like Pokemon, Magic, Yu-Gi-Oh, right? The big three. Bandai has a bunch of, IPs within their brand. And then up comes Altered. They throw up a Kickstarter. They're based out of Europe, by the way. France.
Yeah.
And they meet their goal in like what?
I think probably like the first few days they met their original goal.
Yeah.
And then as the days went by, they eventually became the most funded TCG on Kickstarter.
Which is crazy to me because as a business owner, kind of seeing the trends of TCGs in the past little while, like we're certainly not at like pandemic highs when supply was just so short, so scarce, and then boom comes Equinox with their Altered TCG, and they're like blowing funding out of the water.
Especially because, Kickstarter TCGs have a bit of a bad
Yeah.
rep,
Yeah.
right? So a lot of stores, they've been kind of scared off and burned before
Yeah.
from these Kickstarter TCGs. So, there's obviously a bit of, risk at play there in terms of stores speculating and deciding whether it should be something they bring on and support.
Yeah.
But I think we kind of really connected with the unique way that Altered build out what it is, and I think it's gonna really change the perspective of stores on this Kickstarter level, at least a little bit,
Yeah.
to show that there can be really good games that come out of Kickstarter, right?
For sure. And I think one of the differences with Altered compared to, there's a whole plethora of TCGs that come out of Kickstarter, as you alluded to, is that Equinox is the new kid on the block, but they're not the new kid on the block. It's not like, someone is forming a TCG game out from like their garage, right? But takes nothing away from those creators. But Equinox is pivoting, not even pivoting, they're including an industry that's adjacent to board games. If you play trading card games, you can probably pick up a board game pretty easily.
Yeah.
And if you pick up a board game, it's not that out of the question of you picking up a TCG game.
There's some complex board games out there, man.
Complex board games, right? And, board games can get very competitive too.
Yeah.
Like I know Catan has like, there's like tournaments.
Yeah, they've
and
got
things
World
like that.
Series
They've
and
got
stuff
World
like that.
Series. So it's like, they're very, I'd say the industries are like cousins almost, where
Sure.
there's a lot of crossover, but definitely nuances, right? And I think that's honestly what's exciting. And you kind of mentioned the infrastructure that they're building Altered on. They have all the connections that they need in the industry. They're not like other TCGs where I'd say probably the crux of the matter is supply, right?
Yeah, I mean, supply's been a big issue for a lot of newer TCGs. You saw it in One Piece, you saw it in Lorcana, and it's kind of hard to say whether that's a good or bad thing, because in one sense, it creates a lot of FOMO, it drives prices up, but I think it's important to really capture as much of that initial demand as there is, especially for Altered, where it doesn't necessarily lean into an IP like One Piece, right? You know, if you don't get into One Piece originally, it doesn't mean that, you know, you stop liking One Piece and you lose that interest.
Right.
You might get pulled back into One Piece or Lurkana. Obviously, that's a huge IP, right, Disney. But for Altered, if you're interested in Altered and there's not enough supply and you can't get in the beginning, it might just fade away and you might forget about it and you might never pick it up again, right? So I think the way that I'm seeing things shape up so far, I don't think they're going to have supply issues. Some people were talking about maybe a supply surplus, like too much supply, but I think that's a much better alternative than there being shortages for Altered.
Well, I think it's interesting that you mentioned that, because it then goes into the realm of, well, I don't think they need to solve a manufacturing equation, because they have their board game infrastructure, so they're most likely leveraging off of, you know, their connections and assets there. Distribution, they figured out. Like, it's no surprise that a lot of their distributors that they're going with happen to have, you know, a big board game focus. Asmodee, which is global.
Yeah, Asmodee's global, which is their main partner. So they've also kind of streamlined that in a sense versus regionalizing distribution,
Right.
which happens typically in TCG, right? Like US will have different suppliers than Canada, will have different suppliers in Europe, whereas for Altered, yeah, Asmodee is, you know, like their global partner, and they do have a reach everywhere.
Yeah, and like, that's again fascinating to me, because it's a fresh approach, and, you know, from a business perspective, they're spending less time on some of these logistical supply chain elements, which are very, very important for TCG's success, as we mentioned. But because they don't have that inherent IP recognition, like, they're world creating at this point, and they can then pour all their focus and effort into, one, making the game inherently fun, two, making it accessible, and that goes from a supply standpoint, but also, you know, a playability standpoint, and three, you know, organized play, right? Crafting a great experience, which, wouldn't you say that, like, aligns quite closely to our values as well?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you know, building community is one of the most important aspects of a TCG. And the most important part of that, at the core of any TCG, is the player base, right? Collectability always kind of comes second in a sense. You can't have a card game that's only collectible and not really playable. You know, I think really only Pokemon would survive like that, but every other TCG, Yu-Gi-Oh, Magic, you know, you need your players to just continue supporting the game, and driving that base level demand.
Yeah, well, you know, I think it's funny you mentioned Pokemon versus Magic or Yu-Gi-Oh, because Pokemon can be inherently collectible because Nintendo has built a whole ecosystem around Pokemon.
But their player base is still huge, right?
And their player base is still huge. So it's like, you know, if you were to say there's maybe 60% collectors, 40% players, but even with that aside, Pokemon has the video games. They've got, you know, the anime, right? They've built this whole world of Pokemon, very, very similar to Disney, where if one area in the TCG is lacking, you still have that collectible aspect of it, right? Because it's been, you know, a 25, 6-year-old franchise that's going stronger than ever, right? Whereas Magic and, you know, I know Yu-Gi-Oh is an anime, but Magic and Yu-Gi-Oh, for the most part, like, they are a trading card game. So you need to have a very, very strong player base to make that successful. So I think Altered is on the right path of focusing on playability and accessibility, right? They, as you mentioned, it's almost better to have an oversupply of cards as opposed to an undersupply, because, again, I think they're approaching it from the lens of a board game, you know, manufacturer, board game maker, right? You want as many people to play your game, trading card or board game, as possible, because that gets people to adopt it. That gets people interested. And I think the cool thing actually is, if you know, just pick up a starter deck, right?
It's your favorite.
Yeah, I love Muna, green Druid decks, nature theme, by the way. If you pick up a starter deck, you know, each starter deck's what, like
30 cards.
30 cards.
It's sorry, no, it's
40
40 cards.
The
demo,
roadshow
the
is
demo
30.
decks were 30. Yeah, this is a full deck. 39 cards plus a hero, 40.
And it's coming in at like
Under $20. We're
like
Canadians.
The
Under
price
20
varies,
bucks,
right?
yeah.
But like a board game, you're typically picking up for around $80 now, right? Like a full-fledged four-player multi.
Yeah.
You grab 4 of these for the price of a board game, and honestly, you could stop there. You could have 4 starter decks, and every time they release a new set, you just pick up new starters, and that is your quote-unquote board game.
Yeah, or if you have a small group, you can rotate decks every time, right? Kind of like some board games, I don't know, Seven Wonder comes to mind, where you kind of use a different board every time.
Yeah.
And the deck's the same, but like you're having a different experience every time, right?
Exactly. So it's almost like a board game in your pocket, right? Where you can take it on the go. You have your own deck, and you don't have to supplement your deck. You don't have to get booster packs. You don't have to do any of that because it's inherently fun just out of the box.
But you will want to.
But if you are playing enough, it's just like any game, right? Again, like Catan has how many expansions now?
Oh, tons.
Like everyone you could start at the base game, but if Seafarers is available or Knights and Cities is available, why wouldn't you want to try it?
Yeah.
So I think like this business model is refreshing to see because they're not trying to push collectability, down your throats and collect because we've seen brands where like they almost come out of the gates focusing on collectability. The one that comes to mind is MetaZoo, and I don't think that's the way to go. So
yeah, well
they went bankrupt. So
yeah, so you touched on it a little bit. I don't think we fully defined it, but right now the game is more 1v1.
Yep.
But there is going to be a multiplayer 2v2 aspect where you can have 4 players playing on one board. So, that's pretty unique in itself for a TCG. Obviously, Magic has Commander, but not many TCGs will accommodate more than two players, right?
Yeah.
Which kind of leans into more of, like you said, having a group or playing with the family and just kind of treating it like a board game. You can swap decks in and out, and yeah.
It's got a low floor, high ceiling, and I think that's a great approach. Appeal to the lowest common denominator, right? A lot of the times I think for TCGs it's hard for people to get into it because it's almost a little bit intimidating, right?
Yeah.
Like I'd say what we consider to win, like both of us got our wives to play Altered and try it. They liked it.
Yeah.
I'd be hard pressed to kind of convince my wife to play Magic.
Yeah.
I love Magic, but like, if you play Magic, you can understand that if you're going from no TCG knowledge at all to building a 100, card commander deck and kind of even reading the text, it's not the easiest for someone that's not in the space. So I feel like the best way to almost market the game to your friends and family is like, if they're more board game oriented, present it like it's a board game.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
If they're more TCG oriented, present it like a TCG, right? You're kind of appealing to both. And then just play at the levels, right? Like you don't want to get just, if you got an S tier or meta deck in Pokemon or Magic and you're trying to get a friend to play, you're probably going to go easy or use something that's more the right skill level.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that this OP competitive play, casual play, I think that's like its own conversation, man. Like,
yeah, which I think we'll cover in a video itself.
Yeah.
Right. Like, it's the sky's the limit with Altered. I'm glad that they're devoting a lot of the resources to making it a fun experience. The 6 factions, you've got brown, green, purple, pink, blue, and red. 6 factions, all with their kind of unique take.
Yeah, they all play very, very differently, and you'll find crossover from your other TCGs. Like you have your control wizard, you have your like aggro deck, you have your token deck, you have your like mid game, late game stuff like that, ramp. So it has all those cool aspects, and they've done a really good job building that out. So
One thing that I think we should also touch base on is like, I think the QR code is, some people like it, some people don't like it. Um, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think it takes a little bit away from the look of the card, but again, it is a more so a playing game than it is a collecting game, and it really it's more so there to support the online experience, right? Which, let's talk about that, the online experience. So we talked about Altered kind of really leveraging that board game experience that they have. So for their online experience, they've partnered with Board Game Arena, BGA, which is, if you've not been on BGA, it is a platform where you can just play board games online. I believe they have Catan. They have tons and tons of board games, hundreds if not thousands. You can go on there, and it can be hard sometimes to have a board game group and meet up on a weekly basis or a monthly basis or whatever it is in a central location at the same time. But if you can do that from home, obviously everything's gone digital. And now you can, just sign up for an account and you can play board games online with your friends. And that's what they're doing with Altered as well. That's where Altered is going to be hosted as an online game, and that's where the QR codes come in, where the cards that you get physically, you scan them, that goes into your ownership, your digital ownership, and you can replicate your exact deck online that you can in person. And I think that's really great, because other TCGs, they do have a digital aspect, but you're getting code cards to get packs, to get random cards online, and there's a disconnect between your physical deck and your online deck. You can surely replicate it, but you're doing extra work to try and get the proper cards, right? It's not fully in sync. So I think this is a really cool approach that they've taken.
Yeah, like, why reinvent the wheel, right? If you have your board games playing on Board Game Arena already, again, utilize that existing infrastructure, and now it's going to be a TCG game that comes right out the gates, and you can play it online. I can't recall a TCG game that has done that, where it comes out and you can pretty much play it online right away. But again, Altered is not starting from scratch. It's kind of like they beat a game and now they're starting a new save file, and they've kind of take their existing knowledge to apply to the new run through. And so I think that also leads into the topic of how collectability is kind of not really a thing, because as soon as you scan your card and it goes into your digital deck or your digital kind of user, it's yours digitally. And if you want to play competitively, you need to have the digital copy.
Yeah.
So the physical copy becomes a little bit, like, you could honestly not even play with sleeves, and they have a print on demand feature where, as long as you own the card digitally, you can actually order that card to be reprinted. And I think that's a really, really neat feature that doesn't necessarily make the physical card as collectible anymore. However, they did introduce an element of collectability, and I think that's through there's 3 tiers of cards that you can get in terms of rarity. There's common and rare, and then there's what we call unique cards. So,
which is your legendary, essentially.
Right.
So the 3 tiers of cards, they're based on the same character or the same spell. It's not like, your common is one character and your rares is like a set of pool of stronger characters. It's just, it builds on and it layers on the common version. So the rare card will do something slightly different than the common, or it'll cost less, or it'll have like a slightly more powerful effect. And then the unique is truly unique because it will build from a pool of random stats and put that together hundreds, if not thousands of times. So you'll have the same card as a unique with a different layout of stats, different mana costs, different effect triggers, and there will only be one exact of that card.
Which I'm still waiting for confirmation, because, like, to me that's insane that a unique card is truly
It is, man.
one of a kind. And Equinox did say that essentially what they wanted to create is that no two games are going to be alike, because you're allowed 3 uniques each deck, and if those 3 uniques are the only uniques in the world, then by definition, when you play people, they're going to have different uniques, and they're going to be the only ones that have those uniques, which I think
Yep.
make it a really cool and neat feature. But uniques might not also make the card better, right?
Yeah,
It could
yeah.
actually make it worse. So it's not like just get the best uniques and win, and you're only limited to 3. There's going to be a little bit of kind of creativity in that space and finding something that works for you. But it'd be interesting to see how impactful, I guess, the 3 uniques that you can have in your card are.
Yeah, so for collectability, it does add a little bit from that system because the artwork will slightly change between the tiers, right? So from your common to your rare, there's going to be a slight difference in the artwork, and then to your unique, there will be a slight difference. So it's going to be pretty cool to, in a binder, for example, have the 3 cards there and see that artwork progression and the artwork change. Right. And for some cards, it's like the season will change, right? Because Altered is based on seasonality in a sense. Like you have seasonality and biomes, right? So you have your water, you have your mountain, you have your forest, and there's a lot of like seasonality themes in the cards. So it might change from fall to like more spring, and seeing that progression, I think some people really like the artwork of the game. Like that's one of the big, factors that people do like from it, right? Like,
It'll be interesting once the marketplace, because Altered is building a marketplace, part of their online app, where you can buy and sell and trade cards online, right? So you transfer your digital ownership of a card to another player. They're devoting resources to this marketplace. I know there's actually some big shops in the US that are almost creating their own marketplace, which maybe we can cover in a different video. That said, I think that whole aspect of kind of fine-tuning your deck digitally makes things easier, kind of reduces the middleman of having eBay. And more importantly, I think it just gives another fresh take on how deck construction can go. And at the end of the day, your digital ownership of the card only really matters if you're playing competitively.
Well, and online, right?
And online. But if you're playing locally, honestly, just playing with physical cards casually, I don't think anyone's going to give you an issue with that.
Yeah. And the marketplace is also really great because it just streamlines being able to trade and buy cards. Like, you don't have to go to eBay. You don't have to kind of like go long and wide to search for cards. You have a card, you want to sell it, you put it on the marketplace, or if you want to buy, you go on the marketplace, you transact, it comes into your collection, and you have it right away, right? And then you can just print on demand later. So that's a great feature. I really love their approach to that. So
definitely a video that we'll probably push out once we see the marketplace in full swing, and then maybe even another video just covering collectability once we've seen things kind of settle. Be interesting to see how that evolves. We're definitely in a new space. I'd like to invite everyone to join our Discord. Links will be below. Join the conversation, right? Like, let us know what your thoughts are on Altered. How are you supporting it? As a local game store, we're doing the best that we can. We're going to be running expeditions, which are their casual locals, Saturdays for now. Instagram is a great way to stay updated. And of course, through these videos, we're going to continue dropping and sharing with you our thoughts. And what our thoughts are today might change tomorrow when Equinox releases more information, or not everything progresses as linearly as we expect or as we would normally expect. So we're very, very excited to kick off these series, and
we'll dive deeper into Altered.
So we'll catch you later, guys.
See you guys.